like to think of the medieval world as dirty, backwards, and primitive. But what if we told you that, in some ways, they had life figured out better than we do? Could it be that medieval people actually outdid us in a few key ways? While we often imagine the Middle Ages as a time of hardship and ignorance, history paints a more nuanced picture. This video explores 5 aspects of daily medieval life where their approach wasn't just functional. It was impressively thoughtful, sustainable, and, yes, even modern. From waste-free living to natural sleep cycles, these aren't just curiosities of the past, they're lessons worth revisiting today. This isn't about nostalgia for a bygone world, but about understanding how people adapted to survive and sometimes thrive. With fewer resources, closer communities, and a deeper connection to their environment. In a world without plastic, packaging, or mass production, medieval life was remarkably close to what we now call zero waste. Not as a trend, but as a necessity. Every object, every scrap had a purpose, and nearly nothing was truly discarded. Bread crusts became animal feed. Bones were boiled into broth, then carved into tools or buttons. Even ashes from the hearth were repurposed into lye for soap making. Waste wasn't waste, it was raw material. Food was local and seasonal, reducing spoilage and eliminating the need for long-distance packaging. Markets didn't offer plastic-wrapped produce or bottled drinks. Instead, shoppers brought baskets, clay jars, or linen sacks. Goods like flour, salt, dried herbs, and grains were sold by measure, not by brand. Sellers knew their buyers. Trust replaced barcodes. Packaging was reusable or non-existent. Cloth and textiles were treated with reverence. A worn tunic might be mended a dozen times. When beyond wear, it became rags, then stuffing, then fire starter. Leather was patched and restitched. Shoes were resold, not replaced. Broken pottery was bound with metal staples. Household tools were forged to last, and when they broke, blacksmiths restored them. Even candle stubs were collected and melted down to make new ones. Leftover wax drippings from churches or manor halls were gathered by servants and reformed into new tapers for household use. Even biological waste had a place. Animal manure fertilized fields. Human waste, in some places, was composted or used in agriculture. Gray water from washing was poured onto gardens. The idea of a garbage bin, of discarding something permanently, simply didn't exist. Compare that to today's disposable culture. Fast fashion, single-use plastics, overflowing landfills. We buy, we break, we bin. Yet the medieval mindset offers an alternative: to mend, reuse, adapt. Not out of nostalgia, but out of respect. For labor, for material, for the planet. In an age where sustainability feels like a futuristic challenge, it may be worth looking backward. Not to replicate the hardships, but to rediscover the wisdom and resilience built into a world where nothing was wasted and everything was valued. In the medieval world, clothing wasn't just fashion, it was function, investment, and inheritance. Every garment was valuable, and almost nothing was thrown away. Clothes were often handmade from natural fibers, like wool and linen, spun and woven locally, and sewn by family members or neighborhood tailors. A tunic or gown might take days to create, and its use could span generations. When clothing showed signs of wear, repair was immediate and expected. Seams were restitched, patches applied with care, and fraying edges reinforced. Darning socks or weaving new fabric into worn elbows wasn't just thrift. It was pride in stewardship. Women passed on skills for mending and tailoring to their daughters as essential knowledge, not optional craft. Garments followed a life cycle. A noblewoman's fine dress might be gifted to a servant, then recut into a child's tunic, and finally transformed into quilt lining or kitchen cloth. Even worn-out belts and shoes were repurposed, the leather reshaped into knife sheaths or tool pouches. Every thread was accounted for. Old cloaks were turned into winter blankets. Worn hoods were stuffed with wool scraps to make padded gloves. Nothing disappeared. It simply changed form. Clothing was also deeply seasonal and regional. People wore what suited their environment, and layering allowed garments to serve multiple functions. Linens for summer, wool for winter, waterproofed cloaks for rainy seasons, all were cared for meticulously to prolong their use. In contrast, today's clothing industry produces billions of garments annually, many designed for obsolescence. Fast fashion encourages rapid turnover. We buy cheaply, wear briefly, and discard easily. Yet most of what we throw away still has years of use left, if not more. The medieval approach to clothing reminds us of a slower, more respectful rhythm. Ownership came with responsibility. Maintenance was a virtue. Style was defined less by trend than by utility and durability. We might not go back to spinning our own yarn, but learning to sew a button, hem a sleeve, or choose quality over quantity can reconnect us with the roots of real sustainability. In a time when global textile waste surges, their habits feel not outdated, but ahead of their time. In the medieval world, time was not measured by clocks, but by the sun, the seasons, and the body. Without electricity, glowing screens, or night shifts, people lived in harmony with natural light and biological rhythms. The day began at dawn, when the cock crowed, and ended not long after sunset, when candles and firewood became precious commodities. This created a lifestyle far more attuned to circadian cycles. Work was done when light allowed. Meals followed the rising and setting sun. Sleep, too, was different, and arguably healthier. Many medieval people practiced what historians now call segmented sleep, two separate phases of rest with a quiet period in between. This early morning interval was often used for prayer, meditation, storytelling, or even intimacy. Artificial light, when used, was minimal. Tallow candles and oil lamps were costly and reserved for necessity. Darkness was not feared. It was embraced as a time for stillness. The modern obsession with productivity, long into the night, simply didn't exist. Instead, people accepted rest as part of a meaningful life, not a sign of laziness. Compared to today's overstimulated, sleep-deprived societies, the medieval model feels almost revolutionary. Today we push through fatigue with caffeine and blue light, ignoring the signals our bodies send. We stay up scrolling, working, watching, and we wonder why we're tired. Of course, medieval life had its challenges, but its relationship with time offers a valuable lesson. Slowing down is not failure. Listening to your body is not weakness. And syncing your schedule to the sun might just be the most ancient and most effective form of self-care. Even the rhythm of the week was different. Sunday was a true day of rest, with markets closed and labor paused. Feast days scattered throughout the calendar offered moments of reflection and celebration. In monasteries, bells marked the canonical hours, reminding all within earshot that time was not a machine, but a cycle, one tied to faith, nature, and rest. That spiritual approach to time created a mental space that few of us still know, one where productivity bowed to presence. Community wasn't a luxury in the medieval world. It was survival. People depended on one another not only for food and labor, but for emotional support, safety, and care. In villages, neighbors shared ovens, tools, and harvests. If one family's roof collapsed, others gathered to help repair it. If someone fell ill, nearby women stepped in to cook meals, mind children, or fetch water. Daily life was filled with moments of shared labor, Sheep shearing, haymaking, and brewing beer were often communal events, followed by storytelling and food. These weren't just chores, they were anchors of belonging. In the absence of formal welfare systems, help came from kin, neighbors, and parish networks. In cities, guilds and parish groups offered structure. Women supported each other through childbirth, mourning, and market work. Even seasonal celebrations, like Saints' Days or harvest festivals, were expressions of communal identity. People danced, feasted, and prayed together not because they had free time, but because community life was inseparable from survival. Medieval people also relied on each other for knowledge. Recipes, remedies, planting techniques, and family histories were passed along orally or through demonstration. A young girl might learn how to treat a wound from her grandmother, or how to tend bees from a neighbor. These community-taught skills formed an invisible web of resilience. Shared wisdom filled the gaps where books or formal schooling could not reach. There was also emotional intimacy in these networks. Women gave birth surrounded by other women. Grief was not suffered in solitude, but met with ritual and shared remembrance. Celebrations, too, were participatory. People sang together, not for performance, but for communion. Modern life often isolates. Neighbors may live next door, but remain strangers. The medieval model reminds us of something powerful: interdependence. That vulnerability shared can become strength. That care given freely builds trust no policy can replicate. We don't need to return to thatched roofs and dirt roads, but we can knock on a neighbor's door, offer help without being asked, and reclaim something rare in today's world: the warmth of a community that sees, hears, and holds its own. Self-sufficiency wasn't just a virtue in the Middle Ages, it was essential. For the average medieval person, waiting on outside help simply wasn't an option. Whether you were a peasant, tradesperson, or even a land-owning lord, there was an expectation that you knew how to produce, fix, and manage the basics of life. Most households grew at least part of their own food. Even urban families kept herb gardens or chickens in cramped courtyards. People baked their own bread, brewed their own ale, cured their own meat. A broken tool didn't mean a trip to the store. It meant grabbing a hammer or heading to the forge. Skills were passed down through generations. Children learned by watching how to weave, dye, spin, build, carve, and dig. A young boy might know how to fashion a fishing net or repair a barrel by the age of 10. Girls learned how to preserve food, stitch clothing, and assist in births. Knowledge was practical, local, and vital. Even homes were often built by their occupants or with help from neighbors. Thatched roofs, wattle walls, and timber frames were familiar to many. If your cart broke, you fixed it. If your shoes wore through, you patched them. The line between specialist and amateur was thinner, because everyone had to be at least a little bit of both. Self-sufficiency extended beyond tools and food. People made candles, mixed natural dyes, cut firewood, fetched water, tended livestock, and processed raw wool into yarn. There was no single job title for all this. It was simply life. Everyone contributed, and everyone carried a portion of the community's resilience on their back. Today, many of these skills are lost to convenience. We outsource almost everything: food prep, repairs, cleaning, even childcare. But in a world of rising costs and resource scarcity, there's a growing hunger to reclaim this older model. Not to become pre-industrial, but to become more capable. The medieval model reminds us, being handy is power. Making things yourself builds confidence, creativity, and connection to the world around you. Self-reliance doesn't mean isolation, it means resilience. In the end, medieval life wasn't just about hardship. It was about adaptation, intention, and balance. These 5 areas show us that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes the past holds solutions we've forgotten, ways of living that honored the environment, community, craftsmanship, and rest. We don't need to trade in our smartphones for spinning wheels, but we can choose to repair more, waste less, sleep better, trust our neighbors, and do more with our hands. The Middle Ages weren't perfect, but in some surprising ways, they were wise. Which of these 5 would you bring back into modern life? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this look into the unexpected strengths of the past, subscribe for more surprising truths about medieval life.